Okay, boys and girls, we are live against the advice of my attorney and everybody that knows me. Hello, John and Danny.
I'm
We're
way
here.
over here.
We're here.
Hi.
Hello. So, not much happened yesterday except for Cell Cordova released his third installment of the eukaryotic cell evolution problem. So, the evolution of complex eukaryotic cells with a nucleus, and he's got a number of points, and I linked some papers that are kind of enlightening, and he points out some problems. And oh my god, I just got a notice on my phone that Speed of Sound is live. For a moment there, I just went into one of those Vindaloops. I don't know if you watched that South Park episode, the Vindaloop. Did you, John?
I'm way over here in the kitchen.
Oh, you're in the kitchen. Hi, John. Anyway, bring me some more coffee because I'm fucking drowning here. Anyway, okay. So, has found some issues with eukaryotic cells, and I would have to get my drawing board out to explain them. And I'm not sure exactly what direction we're going to go in today, but he came up with some of it's Scott, some of it's legitimate, some of it is things that he found, that are a problem. He's got a bunch of. There are two problems that he identifies, and it has to do with the signals that certain proteins have that tell the nucleus to either import them or export them. They're called importins and exportins. It's the name of the protein. So they're legitimate problems, and they're kind of interesting. And I think if I explain it in detail, I'm not sure if I'm ready to do that. Did you want to go anywhere today, Danny or John or anybody first?
Well, I do have something. Of course, I will acquiesce to Danny if he's got anything, but to let him go first. But I did, since Danny's here, have a Twitter thread I was engaging with somebody in over a day and a half or so that was a bit of a philosophical discussion that I'd like to get his input on.
Sure. That will be appropriate. We'll give you time.
Yeah, I'm interested.
Yeah, I can ingest coffee while you're doing that.
Yeah, are you on Twitter, Danny?
I made a Twitter account, but I don't really do anything on it. Yeah, so.
All right. Well, basically what this discussion was about was free will, versus God's omniscience. It was somebody else that started with this guy, and then I dipped in on it, and I'm just bringing it up right now, trying to.
What? Did you have a specific question, or do you just want to know, or do you want to just talk about the tension?
Well, I'm trying to bring it up because I want to be specific in what me and this person were disagreeing on.
Oh, are you about to post the thread?
Right. Well, I'm bringing it up. I'm trying to find it right now. I mean, so if you had anything to vamp on for a few minutes, please feel free.
Well, so.
I mean, if you want to just talk about the subject I brought up in general until I find this shit.
Yeah, so the issue of divine foreknowledge and then human freedom, there seems to be a tension there that a lot of people perceive. Is that if that's the subject, then I can talk about why it seems like it's a problem, and then why I think that so that's to say, prima facie, there seems to be a problem,
right?
And then I think that if we're just taking divine foreknowledge and our freedom, I don't think there's necessarily a tension, right? But I understand why people bring that up, because there's this notion of freedom, I think, that we have that requires a kind of openness in the future, right? So if you find out that you're going to do something tomorrow, right? And let's say you believe that that's a kind of necessary, there's a kind of necessity to it, like you can't do otherwise, then you're going to think that you don't have freedom with respect to that action, right? And I think that that's totally understandable, because what's happening there is that, like, there's a kind of a closedness of the future. Whereas if we look back on our past action, like let's say I ate Fruit Loops for breakfast yesterday, I can't do anything about it to change that fact, right? And
I know I remember that in a past stream with Speed here where we had touched on this topic, and you had explained to me very nicely that that it's not God knows what you will do just based on his omniscience. It's that he knows what you did do, because of him being in a different frame of time. You still had, and you were saying this is the argument that like a Christian would make, or to get around it, is that you still got to make your choice and do what it was you wanted to do, but just God knows it from a different time frame what you did do.
Yeah, I think it's exactly like that, or something like that, in the sense that God's knowledge is logically prior to your action. So if let's say you have fruit, let's say he knows that you have Fruit Loops for breakfast tomorrow. Now, in that time index, right? If you had eaten, Cocoa Puffs instead, God would have had different knowledge, right? He would have not. We would have been in a world in which he doesn't know that you eat Fruit Loops. Rather, he knows you eat Cocoa Puffs. So that's to say that there's the dependency is on your action rather than your action depends on his knowledge, right? So that now there's a fancy term for the fallacy for those that say that because it's going to be something like this, right? Necessarily, if God knows you'll do X, you will do X, and then, or you could frame it this way, actually. Yeah, let's just do it that way. So the way so the first premise is going to be something like this: necessarily, if God knows you will do X, you will do X, and then the second premise is that God knows you will do X, and then the conclusion is going to be necessarily you will do X, which means you can't do not X, right? If it's necessary that you will do X, you can't. So what's happening there in terms of there's a modal logical issue, right? And it's actually, they call it the modal scope fallacy. You're putting the necessity in the first premise that's before the conditional, and the consequent of the conditional as the conclusion, given the antecedent and the second premise. So I can put it in the chat, and just so it's going to be necessarily. So here's the first premise.
Oops.
So wait a minute. Speed, you have a ringtone that is the Peanuts music.
No, that's Scott Duke's theme song when he comes in the room. So.
I'm also going to put it in the oh, that's not very well formatted. Let me try this again. I don't like the formatting. It's confusing.
Well, no, I mean, I understand what you're saying. I mean, and actually, like I found what it was. Okay, so basically, what you just described is the conversation that was going on with these two individuals, and they had been talking about it all day. Might even had gone into the day before, and then I dipped in on it. And the one that was, claiming that that God's omniscience, knowing what you will do, in no way, takes away free will. You still get a choice. And so my first response to him was, from the human perspective, the illusion of choice where there really is none. Once a being knows with certainty how you will choose, it is predetermined and you cannot choose differently. Omniscience by even one being destroys free will. Not even God.
Wait, is he kind of muffled?
A little bit, yeah. You're muffled.
Yeah, you said a lot there. And we have to.
Okay, wait a minute. It's because I had my phone in front of my face. Can you hear me better now?
Much better, yeah.
Okay. All right. What I said was, from the human perspective, it is the illusion of choice where there really is none. Once a being knows with certainty how you will choose, it is predetermined and you cannot choose differently. Omniscience by even one being destroys free will. Not even God can have free will.
You think that follows from omniscience? Is that where it seems like you're saying you could conclude that based on God's omniscience? Do I understand you correctly?
Absolutely. If you're claiming that there's a being that exists that knows all from every different time frame, they know what you will do, as you alluded to a minute ago, like you can't do otherwise. So
yeah, go ahead. Go finish your thought.
There's just a couple more posts. I mean, it was only like 3 posts, and then this guy Darth Coronas responded, "This is just conflating foreknowledge with predeterminism." I said, no, it isn't. It is an explanation of what is if an omniscient God exists. If God has foreknowledge, that by definition of not omniscience must be accurate. Everybody's actions are predetermined. They can act only in the manner described by the foreknowledge.
Yeah.
Well, let me just finish it. Like I said, there's only one more post, and then you can talk about it. He replies, "Wrong. This argument, which I have heard multiple times, just puts the cart before the horse. Actions are not predetermined by foreknowledge, but foreknowledge is determined by actions." And my response, and then this is this is the end of it. Apparently he responded to me, but I didn't get a notification. And I responded to him on that last point he just made. An omniscient being knowing of an event prior to it occurring, prior to the existence of its participants, puts the horse miles in front of the cart. You can't claim your God is infallible and omniscient, then ignore the logical consequences of those claims. Now I didn't share all that with you because I want Danny to agree with me and tell me I'm the smart. I want you to tell me what your take of the topic is and give me your ideas of where I may have fucked up or where I was right.
Well, let's get to your intuition. Let's get to your because you're coming from somewhere, right? And let's understand that first. I think there's this idea that, like, if I tell you, yeah, I'm going to eat breakfast tomorrow, that because I'm a limited being, and I could be wrong about what I'm going to do tomorrow. There's like an openness to the future, right? Someone could break into my house and steal all of my breakfast, right? And prior to me cooking it, and then suddenly, right, the proposition that I ate breakfast or tomorrow is like false or something, right? And so there's this like kind of limitedness that limitation to human beings in terms of making predictions about the future, right? And so you're saying something like, well, let's take an infallible God where he can't be wrong about the future, right? So if I say that, if I make a knowledge claim about what I'm going to eat for breakfast tomorrow, there's still this openness of the future because I can fail with respect to what I claim to know, right? But in the case of God, that's not possible, right? There seems to be some kind of implication that if God says I will eat breakfast tomorrow, there's no openness in the future. That's what it seems like, right? And am I correct? And that the fact that God can't fail with his claim or his knowledge in the same way that if I claim to know that what I'm going to eat for breakfast tomorrow, that could be wrong or something, right? I'm a fallible being. That has something to do with your line of reasoning. Am I correct? You're muted, John. I don't know if you.
Yeah, because I was eating.
Oh, my
yeah, and I did immediately respond. So thank you for telling me before I dropped my pearls for no one's enjoyment. So I think the way you just described it describes my position. Okay, I'm saying that if a person is going to claim that they know that an infallible, omniscient being exists that knows all events, past, present, future, that there is no openness to the future. It can only occur the way that this God knows it will occur.
Yeah, so let me start with where we do agree. I agree that if there's no openness to the future in terms of our actions, I think that really shuts down any sense of free will. Okay, even compatibilist free will, under my view. Okay, so let's start with that agreement, right? If there is a closedness to the future, there's just no free will. Okay, so now the question is whether a being that cannot fail, right? Whether if he knows something about the future in terms of our actions, whether that means the future is closed or not, right? And it seems like it comes from this kind of conditional that if like God knows, if God knows that I will do something in the future, it will happen, right? And that comes from the properties of God, the omnis, right? Now, I agree with that. Okay, in this world, right? Right, in the actual world, that if God says this will happen in the actual world, that uh, that it will happen, but then it comes down to the meaning of what what it means to say that there's a closed future. And here's what I mean by a closed future, right?
Well, real quick before you go on, I just want to say two quick things. One, you kind of scare me a little bit by bringing up the topic in this world, because that's what we're talking about right now. I mean, I understand the concept of, possible worlds and all that, but I'm talking about as far as what can happen and what will happen in this world where people claim that an infallible, omniscient God exists.
Right. So the point of like what most people, even compatibilists, some compatibilists, right? What they accept is this notion of I could have done otherwise, right? And I think that what that translates to is something like in some other world I do differently, right? So if I do something, if I we're talking about free will right now. We're talking about God's omniscience and God's foreknowledge and all sorts of stuff, right? Now, we could have talked about natural selection. That seems like something that we would all accept, right? And what that means is that in the actual world, we're talking about free will. Now, there's some other possible world in which we're talking about natural selection, right? And if you're saying something like, no, it's necessarily true that we would talk about free will, then that other possibility is sort of closed, right? That means there is no other possible world in which we talk about natural selection, given given the time and the persons, right? That is what I take to mean closed, right? That there's no other possible world in which things things are different, right? That in every world we're talking about free will and divine foreknowledge, right?
Well, right. I mean, and just to throw this in there, I mean, yes, if what people claim about their God, that it's infallible and omniscient and has all this foreknowledge, you and me inevitably were going to have this conversation, and I inevitably was going to say to you what I just did. So that's where I'm.
Yeah. Now we have to be careful with. I mean, there might be a tension with respect to God's sovereignty, right? So I think I might agree there that if God determines our so let's take one little step back where we're talking about a world in which God maintains every event. Okay, there's some kind of causal interaction between every event and God's will. Okay, now I think what that does is it closes the future. Okay, that if God maintains that we have a conversation about free will, unless he maintained otherwise, right, we could have not been talking about something different. Okay, now the question is that I think this is kind of what you were saying, right? You think that God's omniscience, right, has a kind of influence on what God maintains, right? What God decrees or what God causes. Okay. And to me, these are very different, right? And I think that, and you also said previously that it follows from God's omniscience that God is all powerful, that God,
No, I'm not saying it follows from his omniscience that he's all powerful. I'm saying that because he is all powerful and is supposedly omniscient and infallible, then that's why it destroys free will. It even destroys the idea that God could have free will himself.
I might agree with that. Okay, I think there are good arguments to support what you just said. Now, where I'm not really on board though is that omniscience is sufficient for destroying human freedom. Right? I think you're going to need another one of God's properties, namely his sovereignty, right, or something like that. That I think might be sufficient to undermine human freedom. Now, there is a response to that, but I think it ultimately collapses. But it's kind of a fancy response. But we don't need to talk about that. The point is that I think I ultimately would agree that given God's omniscience and given God's power and his sovereignty, right, over all events, that's the main one, that might undermine free will. Okay, but I don't think that omniscience is enough to undermine free will. There needs to be a bit more to the story for me. So we can talk about why I think that if you want. I think that it comes down to the fallacy that I was talking about. It's called the modal scope fallacy. We could talk about some examples of the modal scope fallacy and then talk about whether that even applies to God's foreknowledge and human freedom, or I can get straight to it. I mean, I don't know where you want to go here.
Go on.
Well, no, I don't. Okay, we could talk. Do you want me to give an example of the modal scope fallacy and then maybe
sure.
apply it to God? Okay. So it's something like this, right? Necessarily, if John is a bachelor, he is unmarried, right? That seems like a true premise, right? That it doesn't make sense to say that if John is a bachelor, he is a female, or he's unmarried, or he's married, right? Because there's the meaning of bachelor implies, right, the unmarried male or unmarried man. Okay, so we would say the first premise is something like, necessarily, if John is a bachelor, he is unmarried. So let's take the second premise. Okay, the second premise is John is a bachelor. Okay, so the conclusion should just be, therefore, John is an unmarried man. But if you conclude instead that necessarily he's an unmarried man, because the first premise has necessity prior to the conditional, that's where the fallacy occurs. Okay, so do we understand? Did I make sense there?
I mean, I can't really speak to whether you made sense. I can only speak to whether my mind made sense of it, and it really didn't.
Yeah, did you make sense of that yet? Because it's not easy. I think it's much easier to look at it than for me to describe it.
I mean, and I know we always throw this accusation at you, but it sounded pedantic in that you were just trying to distinguish between this is the case and this is necessarily the case.
Oh, there's a huge. It's not. Trust me, it's not being pedantic. It's
no. I don't mean necessarily.
It sounds like that.
I don't mean like that as an overall idea, because there is a distinction between it is the case and is necessarily the case. But in the example you used, it is necessarily the case that a bachelor is an unmarried male. I mean, so that's where I got my confusion from. Like, you were trying to draw this distinction between in your syllogism that that there's something wrong where
there is something wrong with it.
Yeah. I don't get.
Okay, well, can we look at the private chat for a second? So necessarily, if John is a bachelor, I'm typing it up. It's much easier when you look at it.
Why in the fuck are you putting it in private chat?
I'll put it in real chat. But you see, it can't flow. Wait. Is there a way I can share my screen?
Yeah, it's screen share.
Okay, let me open a text edit. Okay, so I'm is that okay, Speed? Because you're right now you're
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay.
He's got to click on it though, so that you're on the screen for everything.
Oh, I see. Okay, I want to change. Can I increase the size? Good. Okay, so there's necessarily. Okay, if John is a bachelor, he is unmarried. He is on a married man. That's the first premise. Okay, now the second premise is John is a bachelor.
I'm sorry I fucked that.
Okay.
Oh no, I fucked that.
Okay. There we go. Okay.
Okay, watch this. 1 second. John is unmarried man. Okay, so there's nothing wrong with this argument. That's not the motoscope fallacy. So the motoscope fallacy is this. Okay, you see what some people do is bring this because there's necessarily in the first premise, they put it in the conclusion unjustifiably. Because what this means, there's a huge difference, even though it doesn't look like it, a huge difference between the conclusion here and the conclusion here. Okay, this means that John cannot marry. This allows for possibly this is implying the possibility of him marrying, which he could marry. So what follows from the conclusion here is he cannot marry. He must be a bachelor.
Well, that's where my disconnect is then, because I see the conclusion necessarily John is an unmarried man, and given the premises, that's true. I don't, and I could be wrong. I'm not saying for sure, but by my reading of it, necessarily John is an unmarried man does not necessarily entail that I could never get married in the future. It just means this is the set of circumstances at the moment that this claim was put out.
Okay, well, let's analyze it logically, and then I'll try to address the intuition. Okay, we understand that this necessity here applies to the entire conditional, right? This necessarily is saying that this conditional is necessary, right? But here the necessity is only applying, right, to the what? The consequent, right? But in your first premise, necessity only applies to the conditional, not just the consequent. Because look at, if we take let's take this, right? There's a difference between this statement, okay, and then
I would understand it a lot better if the conclusion in the second syllogism said necessarily John will always be an unmarried man. Then I could totally agree with you.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. So you're saying that John is an unmarried man just seems to you
right? Because that means in this time frame at the present time. It doesn't necessarily entail that's going to be my state for all time.
Well, but the necessity here changes all of that. So let me try to do it this way too. Look at this. Look at the difference between these two conditionals. Okay, if I put necessarily here, okay, these are actually, logically speaking, if anyone has studied modal logic, these actually express something different. Okay, they're not the same.
I mean, I guess I'm just applying my colloquial understanding of the terminology, and there must be some other, philosophical or logical meaning to those words that I'm not aware of. So that's
look at this.
I'm willing to grant that.
Well, no, I'm. It's got to be understood, or the modal, or the application to God's foreknowledge won't make sense. Look, watch this. What is the difference between these two statements? What do you think do you think there's a difference based on how you interpret the words?
Well, I mean,
there's a huge difference. Why?
I mean, but first of all, it confuses me that, I mean, why are you using the same letter? I mean, A, then necessarily A.
I'll translate it. It's important. If speed is old, then necessarily speed is old, versus if speed is old, then he is old. There's a huge difference between.
Okay, spell out the difference between the two.
Okay, so here, remember, necessarily implies that the negation is impossible. Okay, so if I say necessarily P, then not P is impossible. That's another way of understanding necessity and logic. Okay, so if, let's say necessarily A is A, that means that if A is not A, that's impossible. That's a contradiction, right? So the point is that this is saying what this is saying, according to the logicians, is that speed must be old. He can't be young. That's another way of. This is saying the same thing as this, but here it's allowing for the speed could be young, or he must not. He doesn't necessarily have to be old, which is it's not necessarily that he must be old, right? It's not. I mean, I'm this. I'll just stick with that proposition. Okay. So, like if I said that atheists are evil, right? Versus necessarily atheists are evil, that means that that's very different, right? If I say, "Oh, these atheists are evil," I'm allowing the possibility, right, for them not being evil. We can convert them, right? They can be Christians, right? But if I'm saying necessarily these atheists are evil, then they can't be converted. There's no changing their evil nature. Okay.
I mean, so you're basically, every time you say necessarily, you're talking globally. You're talking.
He means all possible worlds.
Yeah, exactly. That's another way. All in all worlds. That's another way of saying. That's how it's used in modal logic. Okay, this is not.
Okay, that's the part I wasn't picking up on.
No, my bad. Okay, I should have explained that in the very beginning. But you might use the word.
I mean, and I said globally, and then I was going to go on to say like in every possible world.
Right.
Speed said it before I could.
And another way of saying in all possible worlds, if you negate a truth that's in all possible worlds, there's a contradiction. Okay, that's so because what it means to say that there's a contradiction is meaning that it's not true of any world. So if you're taking about, let's say P is necessary, if you take the opposite of necessary, that says not P would be impossible.
Okay, all right. Forget about the hypotheticals. Now, write out the syllogism
for the God stuff.
As you perceived me to be that you're saying is a little wrong, because I mean, and basically, I mean, well, I'm saying premise one. If God is omniscient, knows all events, past, present, and future, or no, I'm saying premise one, God is omniscient and knows all events, past, present, and future. Premise two, God is also infallible and can never be wrong.
Well, you're already...
Premise three, that negates free will.
Yeah, that's an invalid argument. We have to put it in a form, right? I'm trying to put it in a form. So let me put it in the right valid form, and you tell me if this is your argument or not. In which case, if it's not your argument, then you're not committing the fallacy. Okay? So God knows X, and conclusion. This is what I take to be fallacious. Oh, whoops. This is a modal scope fallacy right here. Oh, knows X will happen. Sorry.
Okay, well, then I'm going to say if that's what a modal scope fallacy is, then I am not a proponent of modal scope fallacies. That's all I have to say about that.
You must be saying something different. So when you give me your argument, right?
No, that's what I'm saying.
Oh, this is
I'm
what you're
saying. Necessarily, if God knows X will happen, then X will happen. God knows X will happen. Conclusion: necessarily, X will happen.
Okay, this is a formal fallacy, I think. Which I mean, it's not me just being philosophy mode. I'm saying that this is a fallacy studied by logicians as something that does not guarantee the.
Let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Does every philosophically minded human being agree with what you are telling me right now?
I promise you that every logician. Right now, there are a lot of philosophers that make fallacies. Right? I make them sometimes. I've made them before, and many brilliant philosophers.
Well, I'm not saying that you're making a fallacy. I'm willing to accept that this is what you're saying is accepted and is a standard or whatever you want to say, but I don't think that my thinking is wrong. I don't accept that. Well, I don't care. I don't care how many logicians, make that claim. Okay. Because my argument is what I had stated and basically what you just put up here. Okay. And to me, that does mean necessarily X will happen. Okay. If you have a being that controls everything and they know what will happen and they can't be wrong, then it is necessarily that X will happen.
Well, wait, that's a different argument. You're talking to this in this argument. We're not talking about control or sovereignty, right? The problem here is that you can't get to this conclusion with just this. But the fact that you talked about sovereignty or control,
I'm not talking about okay. Maybe I was wrong to say control. If a being knows everything that will happen, past, present, and future, then the things that being know, and that being is infallible, then the things that being knows necessarily must happen.
I just wanted to comment really quickly. Like, everything that Danny has said is 100% correct.
Okay.
And not controversial.
So your
bottom argument is
hold on, Leo. So your answer to my question would be that every philosopher and logician ever existed would agree with what Danny's saying right now.
Yes, that bottom argument.
You can't even make that claim.
That bottom argument is textbook.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me tell you something, man. There's a lot of philosophical stances that not every philosopher agrees with.
But this wouldn't be philosophy, John. This would be logic.
This is logic.
You can't disagree with logic. It's logic.
Wait. I still think there's a way. If you involve God's sovereignty and control, I think you can make your argument, right? But this has nothing to do with God's sovereignty. This argument itself, right?
Well, right. Okay. And maybe from a logician standpoint, there's something hinky about how I'm putting it. But it doesn't matter, and I'm not being pig-headed here. I'm just saying, in my understanding, there is absolutely nothing that you and Leo could tell me right now.
Wait, I can be your intuition.
Hold on. That would ever convince me that I'm wrong. If a being is omniscient and knows what will happen, and that being, is infallible, then it necessarily what that being knows about the future must take place. I mean, in my mind, there's no getting around that.
Well, I think you might mean something different than necessarily, right? Because necessarily means in all worlds, but you're saying that it will happen. I think when you're saying it must happen, you're talking about how the actual world is, right? And I think so there might not be disagreement if you're just saying that what you mean by X will happen in this world is that it must happen in this world. But they're just using the word must or necessarily different than the logicians.
Okay, I can accept that.
Yeah, because it's tricky when we talk about possible worlds because we think of the actual world. So if you think of possibility with respect to inside a world, that gets into weird stuff. You don't want to do that, right? But
just so you know, when I brought this up, I had no regard for possible worlds. I'm talking about an actual situation where people in this world and this only reality that I know claim that God is omniscient and infallible. And to me, that entails then what he knows of the future must necessarily happen. And I might be using necessarily in the colloquial sense of the word because I'm not familiar with the same terminology you are, but it's just.
Tell me the difference between these two. What do you mean by necessarily here? Because I think what you're saying is that these two mean the same thing.
What?
I'm highlighting them.
No, they don't mean the same thing.
Okay, so how do you differentiate them?
How do I differentiate? Because something happens that just is that's the that's the set of circumstances that occurred necessarily will happen. Yeah, well, and okay, so here's where my distinction is between those two statements now. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's like the example you were using a few minutes ago about, hey, I'm going to have breakfast tomorrow. Okay, so when you say will happen as a human being, then you're right. There's a chance for it not to happen that way. You're just speculating, or you're, inductively saying, every morning I have breakfast. But like you said, anything could come up, and it could be, and then it couldn't happen. But if God says it will happen, this God that deists describe, that I don't believe exists, but if that God does exist, and God says it will happen, well, then that necessarily will happen.
Wait, okay. So I see I think I see where I can address this, right? When a human being says,
I mean, here's the thing is what I've been trying to tell you for the last 2 minutes, and I mean no disrespect by this at all. I mean, I wanted to hear your take on this is, I don't necessarily care where I'm going wrong. I mean, I'm speaking, like I said, I'm speaking colloquially. You are speaking as, a formally trained logician. And, it's kind of like I see a lot of logicians, do the, with the symbols and letters and all that, and write out some logical argument, and I remember telling, Steve McRae one time, he was, doing a stream, or he did a video, and he put up all these, logical equations with the letters and the symbols and all that stuff. And I said, hey, that's all well and good, and it's cool that you know that. But when you put that in a video, you should also include beneath it, just write the argument out in English, because not everybody knows that stuff, So, I mean, I recognize here where I'm making my mistake is I'm speaking using the words as I know them, for lack of better terminology, in a colloquial sense. And you have a different understanding, a deeper understanding of the usage of some common words as they apply to logic.
Okay, yeah. So let me address what you said before. I honestly, so here's what I think about what you just said. When you were explicating the difference, right? You actually, I think, without really realizing it, were invoking possible worlds.
Yeah,
okay.
Can I comment to that? Because I think it might clear up his argument. So let me try wording the argument this way. Necessarily, if God knows X will happen in some possible world, then X will happen. God knows X will happen. Therefore, in all possible worlds, X will happen. That is the modal scope fallacy, because you started with some possible world, but then extrapolated that to all possible worlds, which is not
like I just said a few minutes ago.
That's very good. That's very good.
Okay, and that's a very good explanation of the discussion you're trying to have, and it highlights how it's not anywhere near the discussion I was trying to have, because I'm not talking about fucking possible worlds. I'm talking about the one world in which these theists claim their God has these attributes. I mean, why?
But John, you used it when you explained the difference between these two that I'm highlighting. You actually, without knowing, used the word could, which you could doesn't really make sense outside of like another scenario or another hypothetical or another possible world.
I said it said it could happen if a human being is saying will happen.
Right. So you're saying here,
Danny, you muted yourself.
You're saying here it could be different. Here it is necessary, meaning it couldn't be different, of course, right? Or it must be that way. And there's in all worlds, that's right. And that's what I think that's what I've been saying, right? The point.
You muted yourself again. Is somebody else muting him, or is he just doing it to himself?
I don't know.
I think Speed's fucking around. He muted me, unmuted me. I was muted and he unmuted me.
I don't know.
But I mean, that's all well and good. But whether I inadvertently touched on it in what I was saying is not in any way probative to me. I'm not saying you're not right. I'm just saying, as far as what I am trying to say here, I'm only considering what, the implications of this one world, the one world that, possible world.
Yeah. I think what's happening, he's hitting you over the head with modal logic, which nobody is prepared for. And I think the real difference is that you're talking, the difference would be if God ordained everything to happen and God knew what was going to happen. But there's a difference, okay? God can know what's going to happen without preordaining it.
I never claimed that he did. Right. All I'm saying is the fact that he does know what will happen prior to it happening, and even before the participants in the the happening are even exist. I'm not saying that he's ordaining what will happen, but since he knows it ahead of time, then that negates the free will of the individual that he knows.
Well, if he just knows it, okay, like he set these individuals up to have free will.
But you can't have, wait a minute, but you can't have free will. It doesn't, I'm not saying that he ordains it, but I'm saying if you know 1,000 years from now, so-and-so is going to do X, then how does so-and-so have any free will to choose anything but X?
You just knowing that he's going to do it with his free will does not negate his free will.
Of course it does.
No, can I provide an example?
No, you're just looking ahead of time. So people believe that God can look ahead across all time and know everything, right? Okay, he can look ahead and know everything. So if these creatures have free will, God is going to know what choice they make. But the whole idea behind free will is so fucking dumb anyway.
Well, can I provide an example
don't go that direction.
That might clear things up? If somebody is walking along a path and the path just is a cliff, they're going to walk off the cliff. You can see that there's a cliff there, and you know that they're going, if they keep walking, right, they're going to walk off the cliff. Good and example. Then they walk off the cliff. The fact that you knew they were going to do that before it happened, did that remove the fact that they willfully walked off that cliff? I would say it doesn't.
I mean, I got to tell you what, Leo, I think you fucking nailed it, because right now I feel like instead of precipitating this conversation, I wish I had just walked off the cliff.
Well, but I mean, I'm content that we brought the at least the response for you to think about, John. If you feel like we've hit a wall, then I'm fine with talking about something different.
Well, no, I'm not saying we hit a wall. I'm saying that I ran into a wall where I guess I'll just say it plainly. I'm unwilling to necessarily accept some of the things that you told me. And
oh no, I got a kitty.
What's that?
You know what logicians call that? They call that irrational. But if you go against logic, it's just by definition irrational.
Wait a minute. So that's irrational, but it's so rational to sit around and pontificate about what might happen in possible worlds. Like, come on, man.
But logicians use that term.
Possible world really just means that you're working with a conditional, and that's what the word if means. If you grant this conditional means that in some possible world, if such takes place, then these would follow. But it isn't a statement that those things are or will take place. It's saying that under the conditions of these taking place, such will follow, which again goes back to like conditional logic.
Yeah, I mean, and there's a whole it's called modal logic, right? And I think that you should really, I think there's something to think about, because if you reject that, if this is your argument and you see that it's fallacious, then I think you're subject to a revision. But that's as much as I can say. Maybe you're not saying this, because I do agree with what Speed said, right? Where he said that if God is in control of everything, right, and if he knows all possible outcomes, right, in terms of what he actualizes, maybe there's a problem for free will, right? In fact, such a question pushed many famous Christian philosophers into open theism, right? Open theists think that God doesn't know the future or can't know the future, right? Mm-hmm. Some of the most famous Christian philosophers, like Richard Swinburne, for instance, is an open theist, right? Because of this problem, right? When you insert God's will, right, into the picture. So I think there's some good conclusions about, or good implications of free will. But I think what Speed was saying is that just simply knowing is not sufficient to undermine someone's free will.
Exactly. And William Lane Craig, I mean, like I said, I give credit where credit's due. One way that I've always liked how he words it is God's knowledge or God's foreknowledge and God's will are not the same thing. God's knowing an event will happen prior to its occurrence is not in any way, shape, or form ordaining or predetermining the event to happen. It's a knowledge of an event happening, but not a willing of it to happen, if that makes sense.
I got that. That took you guys an hour.
Look, I never made the claim that God is willing events to happen. I'm just saying that it logically follows, if God, who is infallible, knows what will happen, then you have no choice in the matter. It will happen.
It doesn't logically follow.
Hold on, let him finish.
You will make that choice that God had foreknowledge of.
Because I think in a sense I agree with John. If God in possible world X, God knows Y will happen, then in that possible world X, Y must happen. However, I would argue that it doesn't remove any freedom of choice in Y's happening. It just means that Y will happen.
there's still an illusion of choice to the beings that are making a choice, because they still, when that event, when it comes time for that event to occur, they still may wrestle in their mind, am I going to do A or am I going to do B? Which is better, B or A or B? But inevitably, they're going to do what God already knew they will do. So actually, even though they went through the steps of reasoning out what they will do, they really didn't have any free will in the matter, because they had to do what God already knew they were going to do.
Yeah, I think that's correct, John. But the problem is the thing is with that kind of shows that there is no such thing as free will in the way that people are trying to
libertarian free will.
Well, I mean, there's other arguments without even bringing God into it, where arguments and studies where you can show that we really don't have free will.
At least in the libertarian sense, yeah.
I mean, I don't necessarily agree with them, but
I don't know what the fuck they think. It's like if you have libertarian free will, okay, you cogitate, you try to decide what to do, and then all of a sudden, some brain from another fucking world comes in and makes the final decision.
Well, the problem with libertarian free will, at least as I understand it, is that it's essentially arguing that freely chosen decisions are truly stochastic. There were no antecedent determining conditions leading up to a decision being made, which I don't think you could have decisions that are truly stochastic. Every decision that is made by an agent that has some level of free will or agency is made off of a set of priors or off of a set of antecedent factors informing that decision. You couldn't have free will without those previous factors.
The most interesting part of this conversation to me is that I don't even fucking believe in God. So everything I was describing, I don't believe would ever happen anyway. I don't believe there's any being out there that knows everything.
That knows in advance
well, it's an internal critique, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, brushing the cat backwards is effective.
And by the way, Leo, I agree. That's why I left libertarian free will on that account. It's to put it in more fancy terms, the way I learned it is that there's no contrastive reason between doing A rather than B.
Yeah.
Right. That's another way of saying it.
Yep.
Yeah, there's something interesting about this, and that fuck God, but an event happens, right? And there's something that leads up to that event inside your mind, and then you decide, okay, the event that happens is you doing something, and about 200 milliseconds later, this is 200 milliseconds, your conscious mind gets the information about what you did. And basically, it knows that you actually did move your hand, even though you had been thinking about it out here, and you knew that you were thinking about it. So you had all these little events here that you know what you're going to do. And then you actually do it, and it feels like fucking free will. And the thing is that we are not separate from the world. There is no such thing as the mind. There is no such thing as consciousness, per se.
Are you okay there, Danny?
I killed Danny. I killed Danny.
Oh my gosh. Speed. Oh, please. No,
I killed Danny. Where is your mind?
But see, the thing is, I would argue that the mind is immaterial because it isn't made of like matter, but it is still physical, whereby it requires the physical world for that immaterial, I guess you could say, state or set of states to exist. Just like I would argue quantum fields are immaterial. They're not made of anything. They're not made of matter, but they're still physical and real and natural. And I would argue
like motion,
consciousness.
Like motion is physical. Motion isn't like a substance.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's not a substantive, concrete thing Well, I don't know if I'd use the word concrete because I think physical things are still concrete, but it isn't substantive, but there's still a reality to it that can be measured, that has an effect in the real world that can be known about.
Yeah, I think another way is that it doesn't have being, right? Like it doesn't have its own being. It's a bunch of relational properties, right? I don't think relational properties exist like they don't have a beingness, right? Like if I'm taller than you, it's not like that property, the taller than property, like exists like, you know, my whatever makes up my cells. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah, I agree with that.
Mind is a nice word that we use to, talk about something, but it's really doesn't exist.
And see, that's where personally I draw a distinction between something being immaterial and something being non-physical. I think that something that is non-physical would also be immaterial, but that not all things that are immaterial are necessarily non-physical.
Yeah, I think that might be a useful way to term it, but there are so many people use material, physical, natural so differently. You have to be careful about but like everyone has to be careful. Look, this is what I mean by material, immaterial. But yeah, so
now apparently I learned today that you even got to be careful about, the fact that people use the word necessarily differently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one thing I can say is that in logic, whether it's modal logic, propositional logic, predicate logic, a lot of words mean something a little bit different because they have, I don't really want to say they have like an inherent meaning to them because words don't, but the way it's kind of like in science,
there's
certain words have a exactly.
Yeah, there's a methodology. There's a reason why science or sociology or philosophers, right, have their own technical terms. It's because when they're practicing their discipline, it's just useful to really delineate between these terms and give a kind of a technical meaning to help them out in their investigations.
I would argue that the intention with an S of these different terms has different utilities in different subjects, and so it's not going to be the same across all those subjects.
Truth tables are modal logic. You can use modal logic to understand what a truth table really is. Did some work with that, but it's pretty interesting because
you seemed oh, sorry. I thought you were not. You seemed a little perturbed at the idea that we talked about that for an hour, Speed.
Well, did I seem disturbed about that?
No, not disturbed. Perturbed.
Perturbation theory. Okay.
Oh God, let's not.
Oh no, I said that wrong way. Oh fuck.
It's not. I don't even want to go down that road. Perturbation theory is not fun.
I take it back. Anyway. Okay, so back to biology, guys.
But no, John, thanks for asking. It was an interest. I like talking about that stuff because every time I think of ways to explain what I'm trying to say, that really helps me. So
well, and I mean, and given your and my first encounter, who would have thunk we could have had a conversation?
Well, I'm not a vindictive person, but it seems like you're not either.
No, I mean, and I said it to Speed, and I don't know if I ever said it to you. Yeah, I was wholly unreasonable that day. I mean, you had asked in our second encounter or third encounter, oh, so John doesn't hate me anymore. I mean, that was total. What word am I looking for? And just total nonsense or total inaccurate. I just was speaking out of irritation and emotion, not necessarily due to you. Maybe I don't know.
I think you were being overtalked, right?
I mean, I really don't. The only thing I really remember about that incident is that I treated you badly, and at some point, I think I used the words that I hate you or something like that. Which,
it's okay, Danny is our resident philosopher.
Let's put it that way.
I'm very resilient. That's happened to me so many times I can't even count.
Well, you are on Discord, so
yeah.
He is our resident philosopher, and intermittently hating him it's his fucking job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
That was pretty accurate, Speed.
From the job description. Anyway, so
So is that a spermatozoa? What is that?
How did you go there? Okay, we have a nucleus right here, right? And then there's DNA, and the DNA has to be transcribed into mRNAs, right? So we have messenger RNAs, and that's called transcription. And then it has to go out here where it gets translated, basically. So that's translation. So it gets translated into a protein. So Cell Cordova is talking about, and there's something called a nuclear pore. This blue thing is a nuclear pore.
Oh, we're not on nuclear pore complexes again, are we?
Oh, we are kind of.
Oh, Jesus.
Anyway,
He's not going to let that go, is he?
No, he isn't. But so, okay, you found one. What the fuck is it? Topoisomerase, which is his favorite protein. Basically, what happens is the mRNA goes out here, and then we have the topoisomerase gets translated, and then it has to be imported back into the nucleus, okay, in order to work on the DNA. So his point is that in bacteria, the topoisomerase does not have this special little thing. So we have a protein, right? So we have a folded protein, and on this protein, there is something called a nuclear import signal. So NIS, I guess, yeah, nuclear import signal. And what happens is something called an important attaches to that signal. So and then it gets imported back into the nucleus where it can do its work. Well, Cell's point is that bacteria, the ribosomal or the topoisomerase does not have that important signal on it, right?
Hey, real quick, Speed. I never noticed this before because you weren't doing much talking the first part of this, but you've got that running water thing coming through.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah, I was going to say your audio. I don't know what happened, if you're using a different mic or something. But
yeah.
No, I've got.
I mean,
hang on.
You're audible, but it is a little like I almost want to describe the audio as being fuzzy. I don't think that's the right word.
Like there's water running in the background. Is what it sounds like. It's like.
Yep.
Underneath everything.
Sounds like he's in a big office that's got like a fountain in it, and he's like sitting next to the fountain on the Wi-Fi.
I just figured he was in the bathtub, scrubbing his toes, and then operating the little picture board that he draws on.
Yeah, and about the topic we were having earlier is like, I don't care what Danny says. Speed is necessarily old.
I did want to say, everybody, the first part of my new stuff came in today, my Apple Pencil. Now I just need my iPad Mini to get here. And
I had an extra one. I don't know what to do with
why didn't you say so, Danny? No, I'm just fucking with you. I shit, if I'd have known that, yeah, I probably would have.
Because that's how I teach for the last 3 or 4 years. I do what Speed is doing, except much more efficiently.
And I'm going to be doing that for my videos where I explain concepts in science. I want to be able to do the little
I'm gonna do
Speed does.
So when I come out with my YouTube channel and I have all these videos that y'all are gonna get to it before me because I don't know, I feel like I'm busy, but I'm not gonna get to that. But I'm not copying y'all. Y'all are copying me. Okay.
All right. This is what I want. This is what I want you to do, Danny. When you get your YouTube channel going, instead of using a board and an Apple Pen or whatever the fuck you guys were just talking about, I want you to illustrate. You're good. I want you to illustrate your points in your YouTube videos by doing an overhead shot of a marching band making the formations of the words and the drawings you want to show.
Are you going to finance me?
No.
Oh, then sorry, man.
Okay, so it's gone now. So the only fucking job you guys got is to tell me when that wash machine noise is present, so I can fix it in the beginning.
Well, I was just waiting for you to finish what you were saying.
Jesus Christ, you guys. One job.
Yeah, we were over talking you.
Yeah, you took.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so the thing is that he found a protein that in bacteria it does not have this nuclear import signal. So he's asking, okay, if all of a sudden, and bacteria, of course, don't have a nucleus, right? So all of a sudden we have a nucleus, we got a problem. This stuff gets made out here and it doesn't get imported back into the nucleus. And that
they have a nucleoid.
You're muted, Speed.
Everybody got muted except me.
That was weird.
That's really weird.
Wait, you didn't hear me say something?
No, I heard you
you.
said. And
okay,
Speed.
So how much of that did you guys miss? Because when the fuck did I get muted?
Start from the very
right after
beginning of the
Danny
screen.
said what he said. We all assumed you were going to talk, but you were muted. We didn't hear any of it.
Oh wow. Okay. I have no idea how everybody got muted, but anyway, so Sal has the point that in a bacteria, okay, this import signal does not exist on that topoisomerase. So if all of a sudden we have a nucleus, well then how does it get into the nucleus? And that is a problem. But then I found a paper and I posted some of those papers. And there's another thing that Cell talks about, and that is that inside of the nucleus we make an mRNA for a ribosomal protein. It's a protein that goes into the ribosome, the ribosome complex or whatever. So, what the fuck? Okay. So
yeah, that washing machine noise is back.
Oh God, really?
Yeah.
Well, fuck it. Not much we can do about it right now.
Well, it must have something to do with it.
Go away, cat. Go away, cat. I don't need a cat. Okay. So anyway, so there's one of these proteins that gets translated, but then now Cell talks about it, and this is interesting. Okay, the protein gets translated out here, so we have this ribosomal protein, but it's not ready for prime time. It has to be imported back into the nucleus, and then in the nucleus, there's some shit that goes on, and it gets something added to it, and then it gets exported back out, and then it goes into the ribosome, right? Well, anyway, they found in bacterial ribosomes, they found these nuclear import signals in the ribosomes of a bacteria where there is no nucleus. So the first example that he used is a problem for evolution. But the second example he uses is a real problem for God. Like, for one thing, if the ribosome is used out here, why in the fuck is it transferred back in here? Okay, it goes from the nucleus, out of the nucleus, back into the nucleus. Some things are added to it, and then it goes back out of the nucleus, and then it can be used. Now, it seems like God is a fucking really bad designer if he's going to do that. But I hate to use that bad design argument. But the interesting thing is that they did find these nuclear import signals in bacteria where there's no nucleus. So the nuclear import signal is something that is very primitive. And it just goes to show you that, and I don't think Cell found his story and he told his story, but he didn't go and Google it and find out what the whole story was, because the story is much bigger and richer and more complicated than he wants to look into. He just came up with a couple of arguments to show you how, oh no, this stuff couldn't have all evolved at once. But then when you start looking at it, you find little clues. And what they found is that for these nuclear pores and all of the proteins that make them, and nuclear exports and nuclear export signals and importance and nuclear import signals, there are homologs in bacteria that have nothing to do with the nucleus. So they found all these homologs out there, basically in Archaea and in bacteria, that kind of indicates that yes, it did evolve from those different things.
I have to fulfill a request from the chat. Speed.
What's that?
But Speed, where did the proteins come from?
They are irreducibly.
So Speed, those pores, from the bacteria with no nucleus, any idea what their function is?
Oh, the importance that are in the proteins. Okay, the nuclear import signals are what's in the proteins, And no, they don't know what their function is or if they even have a function. So when the nuclear pores were created and when the whole nucleus thing happened, somehow the fact that those things had those signals in them basically set the probably fixed what the signal was, because this signal was present in a lot of proteins, and those proteins ended up getting imported into the nucleus. But there's an interesting paper that I linked called what is it? Beyond the hang on a second here. Let's see if I can find it. Shit, can't find it. It's called Beyond the Event Horizon. And it talks about the evolution of the nucleus. And what they mean by that is, like, if you have a black hole and something disappears into the black hole, it's very difficult to get the information out of it and to figure out. And don't start, Leo. Don't start with Stephen Hawking. But anyway, you lose information when you go into a black hole beyond the event horizon. And this thing, where the eukaryotic cell developed right here, okay, 700 million or 800 million years ago, or maybe even a billion years ago, it's very difficult to look beyond that and figure out what the hell happened. But the creationists would have us believe that it's a real simple story, and they will only tell you half of the story, and they never seem to go Google it and tell you the rest of the story. Because there are proteins in the ribosomes in these bacteria that have those nuclear import signals and nuclear export signals. They found them in genomes, and there's no fucking reason for them to be there. Okay.
Well, Speed, there cannot be a signal without an intelligence behind it.
Oh yeah, I'm bouncing you the hell out of here, man. Oh, it's Smokey Saint. Smokey Saint's there, and he's sending us love. What is that? Is that love?
No, that's not love. That's somebody falling asleep at what's going on in the stream.
Oh,
there's Z's coming out of all those heads.
I thought Smokey was being nice, and he's being an asshole.
Well, and you're not going to have to worry about that for the remainder of the show.
Oh, good. Good. I have no idea what happened to Smokey.
By the way, Speed, when my iPad gets here, we're gonna need to have a little get together so you can tell me how to sync it up with my with my MacBook. I can't imagine it's too hard, but I don't know how to do it. So
not too hard. No, you just download a little program, and then you go and then you learn how to use the damn fucking thing. Anyway. But so Cell is going to go on about this ribosome for a year, and so am I, or not the ribosome, the nucleus and the nuclear pores, or the nuclear pore complex for you. He said there were 100 proteins in the nuclear pore complex, and I think he was really exaggerating. He also referenced the paper, and he talked about how orphan genes were a problem, as if he was getting it out of this paper. And the word orphan is not in that paper. So, I mean, it's the usual shit.
An orphan gene was sort of a misnomer anyway. And the scientists, especially the ones that were pivotal in discovering these, have even said it. Orphan gene was just something we threw onto the name without really understanding what they were. I think now they call them de novo genes, I believe.
Yeah, they could. Yeah, they could be. They're just genes that are in a later lineage, and they're not in okay, we'll find them in humans, but we won't find them in chimpanzees. So where the hell did they come from? Basically, is the idea.
And the creationists and the intelligent design proponents are literally arguing that these genes were I guess created ex nihilo by God, and just boom, there they are, which is
right. Yeah,
really stupid.
They're specially created for humans. Anyway, Standing for Truth is going to have this guy, Joseph Hubbard, on. And Joseph Hubbard works with this Mackey guy, and he is a student, and he's going to be blabbering lies on Standing for Truth this afternoon.
I actually do have, just if you're curious really quickly, a few I've got I've got 2 papers on de novo genes, and then an article from Quantum Magazine. Where do new genes come from? That talks about de novo genes as well. If you're interested, if
And
anybody.
Steve, is that directly from SFT's channel description?
No, this is from. Who's this from? This
No, I'm
is.
talking about when you just said that he's going to be blathering nonsense or blathering lies in this afternoon.
He announced it in chat a little while ago while you guys were having a philosophy talk. And anyway, this is from Creation Research UK, I guess. I don't know. I'm trying to, Creation Research UK.
Whoa, what happened to dude's fucking avatar, man? That's trippy.
Ooh, who's that guy?
You
mean Top Dog?
I think it's Top Dog.
Yeah, it is.
It's Dogan.
It's gameplay of Spore.
Oh.
How did you do that? Okay, now I can move him over there. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It's kind of an older game.
Yeah, definitely.
What is this?
It's called
Spore.
Spore?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I like it. I like Spore. Is that a soft body physics engine that they're using to do that game, I wonder? I'm looking for a soft body physics engine. Not that I'll ever get to figure out how to use it.
Not what I thought it was going to be. I thought when they said Spore, it was going to be like a game based on the movie Spore.
Yeah, so what else is going
They
on?
simplified evolution or something. You can create your own designs, though.
Yeah, and do they deform when they bump into each other? Yes, they do. It's a soft body physics engine. Ooh, I think on top that people wrote that game.
I have it.
No, on top of it.
I never conquered it, though. I've gotten like the 3rd stage or something.
Man, I think you just gave Speed his first erection in like 8 years.
Yep. No, 20.
I play everything, so.
Yeah.
Did you just say I play everything?
Or I can play. I have the means.
Do you play RuneScape?
I played it many years ago, but not my thing.
Wow. There's something wrong with you.
Is this the guy that? This is I think this is his son, Hubbard.
Rimscape. Is that like a porn game?
No, RuneScape. RUNE.
I thought you said Rim.
Oh no.
Oh, it's a family show.
Is it?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, you better stop sending me the invites then.
I know. Oh, let's see. What else do we have here? Okay, we got Peanut.
I was going to ask you really quick, Speed. What is the underlying point of Sal bringing up the NPCs, the nuclear pore complexes? Like what is he trying to get at there?
Irreducible complexity.
Oh, I should have fucking guessed that one, but I wasn't for sure. I guess I wanted to give Sal a little bit more credit than that, but I'm slowly learning that's. I guess that's not what we do.
The gang has already arrived. Brandon, Honesty Angel, David's over there. Standing for Truth.
When's this go live?
No, it's going to be live.
Aren't YECs and evolution denialists? Aren't they examples of reducible complexity?
Yeah,
definitely.
They're actually reduced complexity.
Reduced, yeah, that's
reduced. Yeah. Hate, love, nothing. Redefined living. He's kind of a dick. You know that?
Yeah. Well, I've had a couple of discussions with him in the chat. He just kind of like repeats the same thing without like actually addressing the substance of your responses.
Yeah, and he insults a lot.
Yes, but his insults are like, and I'm not like trying to downplay the fact that they're insults, but he tries to like do those more subtle digs at your level of intelligence.
Yeah. Yep.
This is the 2nd stage on the game where you're on land.
Is the 3rd game like, or the 3rd phase when you're in space?
It's a colon or intelligence, I think, the third stage, and then.
Oh, okay.
I'll never forget that phrase stream where they were talking about.
Hey, the Twitter people that are on Twitter, do you like every once in a while get like this random follow, and it's like some hot chick that's got like an OnlyFans, like they're just going through and following a bunch of people, like as a marketing strategy?
I get that on Facebook. Yeah, I get that on Facebook.
But what were you saying about? Go ahead.
I friended Jen Aldrich on Facebook, and as soon as I did, I got like 20 requests from all these people, and there weren't. I think maybe one or two of them were these porn girls, but most of them were like people that were trying to sell some kind of fucking marketing product or real estate product. And I made the mistake of accepting friend requests for these people until I realized that I should look and make sure that they have more than one friend in common. You know, like Steve, what the fuck's his name? You love him. Steve McRae? Yeah. Steve McRae and Jen Aldrich, and then I would accept it. But if it's just Jen Aldrich, she has a whole bunch of people that apparently she accepted friend requests for that are doing nothing but selling shit.
Yeah,
and
they're usually models.
Why in the fuck would you ever accept a friend request from Steve McRae?
I have very mixed opinions about Steve. I like him, and then again, I don't know.
I used to like him. I used to think he was great.
I think he gets a little too focused on shit once in a while.
Oh, he's horrible. He name drops like crazy. Like when that's what he does. When he gets cornered intellectually, he starts, well, do you disagree with this person? Oh, this person does it. This person who accepts what I'm saying. Are you disagreeing with them? It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Now he's good against like white belts, people that don't know how to argue, people that don't know what they're talking about. But the second that he's outmatched intellectually, he's one of the worst interlocutors. Horrible to hear.
Really?
That reminds me a little bit of somebody else that we're all very, very acquainted with that does the same exact thing. Good old Mad Max.
Mad Ducks?
Yep, literally. Like, you back him into a corner election, that's all he does. He doesn't just name drop, he paper drops, too.
Well, and I wholeheartedly agree with Danny, but the other thing that disturbs me about him, and not to just go on talking about this individual, is that they accuse people of many different behaviors that they themselves display and deny all the time. Like this, the person whom I mentioned, which I won't say their name again, just has no self-awareness at all. That's, so doesn't consider introspection an actual thing.
So Lil Peepee the other night. Okay, Nephilim Free had an after show for let's see, what was it? I forget what it was, but Nephilim Free had like a 5-hour after show that apparently turned into a real dumpster fire between Nephilim and either Standing for Truth or John or one of those. And then right after that, John started his own after show. So he started this stream. I can share the screen here.
Was that the Evolution Experiment Evolutionist Volunteer Needed stream?
No. Nephilim took the stream down, like a 5-hour stream. He took it down.
Never mind.
Anyway, so this is, let's see, I got how the hell?
But before it leaves your mind, you a few minutes ago you were going to comment on something that happened on a praise stream.
Yeah, they were talking about fin de limb evolution, and they were saying things like, what happened? The fish, ran out of food, and he decided to go onto land, and then he, grew a limb, and they were actually approaching it that stupidly, and it was amazing. It was from about 3 months ago, but anyway, so this Nephilim stream, Andrew Cumming, rational empiricist, who's usually with us, was on that stream, and he is no longer the Nephilim whisperer.
What's the title of this? Are Evos inescapable of
incapable of reason, open discussion. So
oh, okay.
it's that one. Let's see if I can make it a little bigger. I don't know. Yeah, you can see it now.
There we go. Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
so this started right up after, and John was talking to this new guy, LRR, and eventually
Oh yeah.
John rage quit his own stream.
And
Well,
went to
okay,
braces.
he kicked LRR out because he was an agnostic. Then John went on about what douchebags agnostics were, and then his guests wanted this LRR to come back. So John said, "Fine, I'll leave." So John left, and then they had him back for a while.
Wait, who wanted LR to come back?
You know, again, like last time, can we call him like dumbass or Maddox or something?
Yeah,
like
I call him Mad Max. That's what I call him.
Mad Max, yeah.
Yeah, you say John, and then they see that there's a John in the room, and they just join the stream, and they think you're going off. On
Pigs Can Fly is also a young Earth creationist.
Hang on a second.
He was when I was in one of John's streams a couple days ago. He was in there with Argatha. Jungle Jargon was in there and was actually being somewhat reasonable. There was somebody else in it. I don't remember who. But Pigs Can Fly and Argatha, while I would disagree with them, and I would say that not just that I disagree, but I think that they're very wrong on a lot of things, they, at least in that exchange, seem to be quite reasonable.
So real quick, I forgot already in just the intervening 20 seconds. What did you say he was saying agnostics were? Speed?
You're muted. Speed.
You're muted, Speed.
I know. I had a phone call. I'm gonna have to step out for about 3 minutes in about 5 minutes. So.
All right. So what was it you said that John Maddox was calling agnostics?
Okay, this LRR.
I'm just asking you. You use the word that he was saying agnostics were
like douchebags or something.
Idiots or douchebags.
Douchebags. Okay, yeah, because to me, that is the most ironic thing in the world. Is John Maddox calling somebody a douchebag?
Yeah.
That's not like the best example of the pot calling the kettle black, I don't know what it is.
Exactly.
So okay, here's where let's see. I'm not sure where John quit. At some point, John quit. But anyway, and there were a whole bunch of other interesting discussions that happened during it. But I really wanted that Nephilim stream because I wanted to see what the hell happened because they were talking about it on here. They said it was a real dumpster fire on Neff's channel.
Well,
but he took it down.
The thing with Nephi is, and Argatha was in there when me and Snake went in there when he was doing his after show for the debate that he cowardly ran from, like a little bitch made bitch boy bitch. But even Argatha, or Bob is what a lot of people call. I don't call him that because I don't think he cares, but I just try to call people by their screen names. Anyway, was straight up telling Nephi, like, dude, I'm on your side, but you've done nothing but over talk and steamroll over everybody in your stream. Like you're asking questions and like not even letting people actually get a response out, and it's just not conducive to decent discussion. And because that's literally all he does. That's all Nephi does. He just steamrolls over people.
Yeah, he was raging and he was over talking that LRR, and he couldn't get a word out, and then finally John booted him out of the studio. And then let him back in, and then John left, I guess, for a while. But
who did you say it was that wanted LR to come back in?
It must have been. It was whoever was in here. Let's see. When the fuck did he come back? Okay, there's LRR. So it must have been Pigs Can Fly and Jungle Jargon and Argatha that wanted to talk to him. Because then John, I think, came back in later. Not sure if he did or not. No, John never came back in.
Keep going.
John comes back in here, and he probably booted LRR again shortly after in the wing. No, LRR is still there with John. So they must have kissed and made up, and then now both of them are gone. So maybe they went on and got a room.
But the problem with LPP isn't that he's not like Nephi where he's just going to steamroll over you. But if you're reasonably challenging him on something, then he will. Like he's the kind of person where he cannot stand being around other people that are capable of actually challenging him on what he believes in a way that he can't really respond to.
Yeah, and then he snorts and laughs. And,
Well, because the thing is, when I went into his stream, like, oh god, this was sometime last week. I can't remember. I actually came in because I wanted to respond to something that Danny said, but I don't know if Danny's AFK right now or not. Which
No, it was the rape stuff.
No, well, that wasn't what I had actually initially come in to respond to.
Oh,
but
okay.
that's what the discussion. That's what I'm not going to say devolved, because I don't think the discussion really devolved. But that's what we talked about for about 10, 15 minutes. But then we started to with Pigs Can Fly and Argoth. I started to talk a little bit about some physics, and Maddox said he was going to be right back. Left the stream and didn't come back for the almost probably hour and 15 hour and 20 minutes that I was in there.
So I guess not only hashtag is John Maddox a grifter, John Maddox is a drifter.
And a coward, yes.
He's a coward. He won't. He loves to be on his channel where he has total control over everybody, and he likes. I'm pretty sure that he never shows his from the waist down, but I'm pretty sure he's wearing leather. You know, and he's got a little whip.
Oh wow.
A little ball gag, just in case you need it. Of course, for him, the mute button is his ball gag, and he gets off on that shit. He gets off on just condescending people and being this whole fucking superior arrogance attitude. And when you look at the arguments that he comes up with, the only argument he has is, it's a code, it's a code. And they won't accept it's a code. And then when you say, okay, fine, it's a fucking code, he's like, oh, you know, so you believe in God then? It's like, he's just an idiot. He's just a fucking idiot. And I mean, he never offers anything with any depth at all that you can actually sink your teeth into. Like Sal Cordova. I mean, Sal Cordova, you could sit and talk about, you know, biochemistry and get into all these papers. Mm-hmm. With John, he brings the papers up, but then he never actually...
He'll bring them up. You'll start talking about him, and then he runs from them and goes to get another one.
Yeah. Yeah, and he won't tell you which paper it is because he doesn't want you to actually look at the paper and actually talk about the fucking paper.
Yeah.
He just wants to say his thing about it. It's just
kind of like Otangelo will bring up a paper, and then you notice some things about it that he's got wrong, and then you question him on it, and you go, well, no, but there's this other paper.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll never forget that day, John. That was fucking hilarious.
Here, I explained it on my forum.
Yeah, but the other thing that John will do is, like, if you're trying to explain something and you want to like share your screen to share something, he won't do it because he doesn't want you to explain it and show how he's wrong. I mean, it's just straight intellectual cowardice.
Yeah, it is.
Which really sucks. But the thing that Danny had mentioned, and maybe I misunderstood him because I heard like maybe 5 minutes before this, Pigs Can Fly had mentioned something about quantum mechanics in the early universe, and it sounded to me as though Danny said that he didn't think quantum mechanics had anything to do with the origins of the universe, which wouldn't be true. The early universe is explicitly quantum mechanical, which is one of the biggest problems we have in developing a physical theory.
Let me make sure I elucidate what I mean by the universe is everything that's physical. That's what I mean by the universe. Now, if you mean something different, then there's no quarrel. But if that's what it's meant by the universe, right? And if quantum mechanics is construed as a kind of physical phenomena or set of phenomena, then if once again the universe had a cause, it's not going to be anything to do with quantum mechanics, right? But you could
have to.
Well, then it's just not physical.
Well, it is, because quantum mechanics is physical. The early universe has to operate quantum mechanically. That's why we don't have a physical description of it, because we can't get general relativity to work with quantum mechanics, which it has to work with.
Okay,
the earliest stages of our universe are explicitly quantum mechanical.
You disagree with the conclusion.
But quantum mechanics has nothing to do with the origins of the universe.
That's the conclusion, but what premise did you disagree with?
I disagreed with your conclusion. You were saying that quantum mechanics doesn't have anything to do.
I think my premise guarantees the conclusion. It just logically follows, I think. But so that means there's something wrong with the premise that I gave.
What premise?
So here's the first. Like, I'll put it in narrative form, but here are the premises. It's not particularly valid. So it's going to be something like the universe is universe is just whatever is all physical. Is that not the right? That's what I mean by universe. So presumably you don't disagree with that, right?
No.
Okay. And then quantum mechanics, all of what's entailed by quantum mechanics is also physical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the universe had a beginning, right, that means everything that was physical, right, that it physically exists came into being, right?
Well, no, because time is tenseless. Come into being is not what the universe never came into being.
Yep, wrong.
There was never a temporal becoming of the universe.
Well, there's a sense in which we could talk about it without like assuming a theory. After all, did you begin to exist at some point?
No.
There is no beginning before before time, right?
And
No,
we don't know
there's
how
no-
far back time extends. Time.
North of the North Pole.
The thing is that people are under this impression that science has somehow demonstrated that there is an absolute terminating boundary to physical reality, and that's what we call the Big Bang. That is not at all. In fact, there's nothing that substantiates that, and it's probably not true that there is some initial boundary. I don't know where people get this, and this is what Otangelo does. All these people, well, the universe had a beginning. Well, number one, you're misconstruing what almost any cosmologist would say, or what they mean when they use the word beginning. But you're also assuming that there is an initial boundary when nothing in physics indicates that there is. And while I think that there probably is, I acknowledge that I could be wrong. People like Otangelo don't. We don't really have anything to indicate that, and it might not be the case. But the absolute earliest moments of our physical reality, describing what those are, which would give us a description of how the universe, at least the part of it that we occupy, came into being, is explicitly quantum mechanical.
Wait, but you just denied.
Hold on. But you said this as well as other people. So the farthest we can go back is like within a Planck's time of.
I'm willing to grant that for the sake of the argument. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And then but one thing I've always said, not being anywhere near as knowledgeable as you guys are on this, but like, okay, so if there was that, for lack of a better term, we'd say singularity, or that just before, just shortly, after the Big Bang started, we don't know what other medium there might be that singularity, that Big Bang came out of. So that's why I always balk at the idea that, yes, our concept of time started, as far as we know, started with that Big Bang, and all the physicalness of the universe started with that Big Bang. But we cannot definitively say that this universe, or the beginnings of this universe, or the singularity, or whatever you want to call it, didn't start out in another realm, another medium in which there was some form of time.
Yeah, that sounds to me a lot like what you would be describing. To me, sounds a lot like something like the Carroll-Chen model, or other models that essentially posit that prior that what we call the Big Bang is just not a boundary. Or what is the term? I cannot think of the technical term for it, but that prior to this universe, there was a universe that was contracting from minus infinity, and then it came to a point, but there wouldn't be like a technical singularity there. What happens is it just kind of, and then comes in and then bounces back out to our universe, which expands to plus infinity. So in that case, there would be no beginning. There's just no beginning at all.
Wait, so have you always?
I mean, I understand what you're describing. That's just the inflation deflation model, that it's cyclical. Okay, but what I'm saying is that I hold out the possibility that this universe, whatever it was when it first started, emerged from another universe, for lack of a better term.
Oh, so you're talking like chaotic eternal inflation or something like that.
Yeah, I really don't know what the
which would be like.
What is I'm saying? I'm just saying that we it's just that the reason I'm bringing it up is I balk at the idea when people say definitively time did not exist before the Big Bang. Well, since we don't know where the Big Bang came from, and that there could be other universes out of which this universe came, to definitively say time did not exist. I think it's more accurate to say time did not exist in this universe until the Big Bang. I mean, I don't know.
I guess wait, Leo, have you always existed?
The parts of me, yes. Mass energy, per the first law of thermodynamics, has always existed. Yes, just because you can get different, sometimes quite complex forms of it, just doesn't really mean anything. Maybe to us humans, it does, but what we think about the universe and what the universe is are two completely different things.
But I'm not asking how long the parts have existed. I'm asking
How
how
you
long
giving
the
me a
whole.
seizure?
How
Yeah,
long?
but I am nothing but the sum
I'm
of my
trying to fix
parts.
it.
Well, the
So
sum of your parts is your whole. Presumably, you're complete when they
Giggity.
come together, right?
Giggity. The sum of
The
your
new form is yes.
Okay, so that's you. The parts that without that configuration is not you.
Which is irrelevant.
Well, then the question becomes you. There's a sense in which we could talk about you coming into existence, which is just means that that the parts came in a kind of configuration to form yourself, right?
I mean, if somebody wants to, but
Okay, so
science
there's a sense in
doesn't
which you did come
necessarily agree with
in
that.
that sense, right? You came into being, if that's what we mean.
Well, in some philosophical sense, you could argue that it's just not going to be accurate in aligning with science. It's like saying that when an ice cube melts, the water comes into existence. Well, no, because the ice cube was also water, it was just in a different form.
Yeah, I understand that. That's why I actually don't think I'm physical, but I'm trying to take that. I don't want to go in that direction, but the point being is that it's not incoherent to say that something just pops into being. That's not
Well,
incoherent.
yeah, but that's
Kind of.
when you say something pops into being. What do you mean?
Meaning something began to exist without a cause.
Well, things.
How the fuck did that happen?
It
I
doesn't
mean,
matter.
yes and no. There are events that can occur acausally, but you can't have something that is previously in a state of non-being ontologically arise or move into a state of being with nothing to initiate that change of state.
Are you saying there's a contradiction?
Well, yes,
What are the two propositions that are contradictory?
the ones that I just said.
Wait, you said that. Presumably that's the claim. The claim is that there was a state of non-being, and then there was a state of being.
Well, non-being isn't a state; it's the lack of states. You can't get a state from the lack of
state
state.
refers to state of affairs, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes, I know that.
Okay, but so state of affairs doesn't commit you to an ontological category, right?
It kind of does. If
No.
if there is no ontology, then there are no states of affairs.
No.
Non-being is the absence of state
you're
affairs.
abusing the
Like
words, right?
Nothingness and non-being mean the same thing. In the philosophical sense, it is the absence of any and all states
Look,
of affairs.
are
It
there
is
any
itself a state of
are there
affairs.
any T-Rexes that exist?
Yes.
Is that a true proposition? That refers to a state of affair where there
Yes.
are no. Okay, so states of affairs don't commit you to anything existing.
Well, they do, because if something doesn't
What
exist,
exists?
there is no state of affairs there.
Hey, guys, I'm going to interrupt you right there just to say goodbye. My brain is still hurting from the early conversation, so I don't.
Okay, John.
And I just want to point out before somebody makes a mistake, it is Otangelo Grasshole in the chat, not Otangelo Grasso. So,
Anyways,
I thought they were this.
the point is that I don't see a contradiction in saying that something came into being without a cause, and I don't think you see a contradiction either, right?
Yeah, but when you're talking about time, you're talking about time and space coming into being, sort of, and you can't do that because
Being doesn't
you
occur
can't
without
jump
space.
out of time and start.
Wait, you could have a universe with just time and space, right? Well, sorry,
Well,
I'm sorry. Is the universe are you construing the universe in terms of time and space?
The universe is time and space.
They are.
Together, yeah.
The whole of contiguous physical space-time reality and its contents is the technical definition of the term the universe.
Do y'all think time exists ontologically? Like
No, it does exist ontologically. We can measure it.
Yeah.
It can be affected by things inside of it. We call that gravity.
Wait. Okay. So, do you think you could measure a center of mass?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think the centers of mass exist?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do they exist? Are they material?
No.
Okay,
I've
so
already granted that things can exist in a state in the sense that they're immaterial, but they're still physical.
Okay. So what makes time physical?
The fact that it is a part of physical reality.
Part
That
of
You don't see that as begging the question.
It has a measurable effect. It can be measured and quantified with physical quantities. It has some macro scale of that's what it means to be physical.
Okay, so that you can measure it.
what makes up and down physical?
Yes, but that's a bit more simplistic.
Do you think math is
makes up
physical?
and down physical, Danny?
Math
What makes up and down physical?
Okay. Well, do you think math is physical?
No,
Yeah, I do.
math is abstract.
Okay.
Abstract
Do you
is
think
bullshit.
Do you think mathematical objects exist, like numbers?
No, mathematical objects are abstract.
Okay. Abstract things don't exist.
Abstract things exist, just not concretely. That's why we call them abstract.
So things can exist outside of the time-space continuum, right?
No,
No,
I don't think
nothing
they
is
exist
abstract.
outside of it. They're abstractions of what space-time is and how things work in it that exist in minds.
Oh,
Still
so you're
physical, still dependent. You couldn't have math if there was no physical reality, because math is an abstraction of physical reality, what it is and what it does.
I'm prepared to grant that. I'm just
Just
saying.
like you couldn't have a map of Africa without Africa.
Well, yeah, you can.
No, you can't, because then what would the map be of? It wouldn't be of anything, because the thing that it is of no longer exists. So you can't have the abstraction of it.
Wait. You certainly don't believe this. I have a map of the Shire. That doesn't commit me to saying that the Shire exists.
Well, it does. It just exists abstractly. I have a map of Westeros. Westeros exists as an abstraction.
But you said you can't have a map of Africa unless Africa exists, right? And
Yeah.
then, so
And
either
Africa
in the
does
mind,
exist.
either
concretely or abstract. When I say exist, that can mean concretely or abstractly. I'm not being.
No,
I'm
I
not
agree
committing
with
it
you
to
that
one.
abstract entities exist, but I'm just trying to understand why you think that those. I thought you were saying that whatever comes into existence, right, is going to be physical, right? Or whatever exists is going to be physical. Maybe you're not.
Oh yeah, 100%. If it can't exist but be non-physical.
So, but then how do you square that with these abstract entities?
But those are non-material, but not non-physical.
Okay, but
they emerge out of physical reality. So you still have to have the physical before you get those abstractions of it. So they're not material. Numbers are not material, but they are physical.
Okay, but mathematics depends on the physical universe, then, on your view?
100%.
Hell yeah.
What about mathematical truths?
Are dependent on physical reality. Yes.
So 2 + 2 = 4 depends on a universe?
Yep.
Yeah.
What is the argument for that exactly?
Without a universe, you have literal nothingness. There's no such thing as 2, and there's no such thing as adding.
But that seems like it's begging the question.
No, it's not.
Well, you don't think that you just restated the claim in some kind of conditional?
What?
Wait, so let's think about what you just said. Let's understand the claim. The claim is that a mathematical proposition could only exist if there's a universe or some kind of physical realm, for lack of a better word. That means no physical realm, no math, no mathematical truths. Okay, so when I ask for the argument, right, we're not going to see any of those propositions in your argument, right, until the conclusion.
What does this have to do with what I said?
I'm asking for an argument.
I gave it to you. If there were no physical reality, what would mathematics apply to? What would you have abstracted it out of?
Wait, but that, first of all...
Math is something humans invented. It is an abstract description of a physical thing. You can't describe that thing if it doesn't exist, whether abstract or not. If the thing doesn't exist, you can't describe it. If there were no physical reality,
I don't think you're realizing you're making
math is well, I'm not. I just don't think you understand what I'm saying.
Well, I guarantee
you have to have physical reality to have an abstraction that describes it.
That just begs the question.
No, it doesn't.
Nope.
It's. I would argue it might be tautological, but that doesn't make it incorrect.
So I thought you have to have X to have Y, but I'm asking, why do you have to have X to have Y?
Because if you didn't have X, you wouldn't have Y.
That begs the question.
What would you have gotten Y out of if not the X?
Arguments never are questions. The premises are never going to be questions.
Well,
so
maybe I'm not arguing in that manner, and you're trying to force me to, and I'm telling you, sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, well, if you're not interested, then I'm sorry.
What would math have been abstracted out of if there were no physical
I
reality.
don't think it comes out of anything.
Well, then, so why does it exist at all?
They're necessary truths and objects. I think they're out
So
of necessity.
math existed before humans?
Yes.
So you're telling me that Leibniz and Newton did not invent calculus? Because they literally did.
I think they discovered it.
No, they invented it.
I think now I have a view that J.K. Rowling discovered Harry Potter. So
But that's stupid. She invented Harry Potter.
what's the argument for that?
That Harry Potter didn't exist before she invented it.
That just begs the question.
No, it doesn't. It demonstrates
Why
the
didn't?
claim is true.
Why do you think the abstract object that is Harry Potter didn't exist prior to J.K. Rowling?
Because it didn't exist.
That just begs the question.
Well, no, it doesn't. You're trying to argue that something existed before it existed, and then when I tell you, well, no, it didn't because it didn't exist, you're just going, well, that's begging the question. No,
It's begging the
not.
question. I promise
Something
you it
doesn't
is.
exist before it exists. That's just literal basic
Well,
logic.
I'm asking you to provide an argument for why it didn't exist, and you're saying because it didn't exist.
Makes no sense.
This is just textbook begging the question.
Sure, whatever. I mean, if you think so,
That's not.
that's
Do you
fine,
accept
but it's
question begging
not.
arguments?
Well, my argument is a question begging.
God exists because God exists, or God doesn't exist because He doesn't exist. Do you think those are good arguments?
I think that they're true, yeah. So if something exists, then it exists. In fact, that's one of, I believe, the fundamental laws of logic.
I don't accept question begging arguments. If you were to ask me why,
what is the difference between a tautology and question begging?
well, I think that one's an inference and the other one is true by meaning, right? I'm not. When you say
And
bachelor's
that's
in
what I'm saying.
American,
It's true by meaning. If something doesn't exist and it's true, it doesn't exist.
but you're making an inference there. When I'm asking, we want to distinguish an argument from a claim, right? And one of the ways we do that is we don't see the claim in the argument. Okay.
I love Anthony or Tangela Grassel.
Maybe we could talk about it privately or something. I don't know.
Anyway, so you got off on this. Basically, you have to take this abstract bullshit and set it aside because abstracts don't exist. And you got off on this because of the Big Bang and a misunderstanding that there can be something before.
I think there could be something.
Well,
What's the I don't see the
abstractions-
contradiction.
Abstractions do exist. They exist as non-material emergent properties of physical reality. If you don't have the physical reality, then there's nothing for those abstractions to emerge out of. So you wouldn't have
But you
those
give a
those
question
emergent
begging
abstractions.
argument for that, though.
That is the argument.
We got the idea about counting from basically having apples and having,
Having
a certain
having
amount of
sets of physical objects, yes.
physical objects, yeah. And physical objects can be different, and that's because of space. And then we have time. And when you combine space-time and you step out, you abstract away. So now you have 4 dimensions. You necessarily can no longer talk about things coming to exist or popping into existence, because now you're one step out from all that. You can no longer talk about time. You can only talk about this mathematical.
I think it's sensible to say that something came into existence, and then, or including like if time began, right?
Yeah,
That's fundamental.
if you want to step back into a 3D space and with a timeline and start talking about like our lives and how humans approach the world, basically there's 3D space in the timeline, then you can talk about things.
Well, let me finish, because I was about to semi-agree with you. I don't think it makes sense to say that time began and then there was a cause, right? Because cause effect rely on time. Okay?
Yeah, exactly.
So,
that's
but I don't
the
see
fundamental
why.
issue with like the Kalam cosmological argument.
Well, but there are certain people that think that God is not timeless. They think that He's
Yeah, I know.
everlasting, right? Which means that you can have.
William Lane Craig is one of them.
No, he thinks God is time. Well, he has a
No, he thinks
has an
God was
in-between view.
timeless sans creation, atemporal sans creation, and then temporal with creation, because God had to be temporal to
But he
create.
doesn't take the view that God has always existed in the sense that he's everlasting, that there's an infinite number of events prior to the existence of the universe that He created, in which He existed. He doesn't accept that view. And some
do think he does.
He doesn't think there were events prior to time, right? Events occur in time.
Yes. So if
Okay.
you can't have
So-
events without time. So anybody that thinks that there is a set of events prior to time
Right.
in which God is there, they're just wrong.
And I'm telling you, there are a set of Christian philosophers that disagree with Craig, that think that there was time prior to the beginning of the universe and the beginning of creation.
Well, then it wouldn't have been the beginning of the universe.
Well,
Because time is a fundamental aspect.
they're going to construe the universe in terms of material things.
Well, then they're wrong. Quantum fields are not material. They are physical and they're a part of reality.
Okay, so we're not talking about, is it not that you're talking about particles? And does quantum theory not depend on particles?
No, it depends on the fields.
Are the fields, they don't exist?
Well, they do.
Well, not in the sense.
They're not made up of anything. There's no substance there, but they're still physical.
Okay, then I just don't know what a field is.
Why? Well, yeah, because a field in like mathematics or like advanced particle physics it's like the vector fields of electromagnetism, for instance. That's a real thing, but I couldn't give you a cup of an electric field or a magnetic field. I couldn't weigh an electric field or a magnetic field, but it's still physical. We can define it, its properties, it interacts with reality, but it isn't made up of a thing.
Well, but presumably
things are made up of it.
Presumably, like in a magnetic field, there's something that it depends on for its existence, right?
No, as far as and the thing is, what I'm about to say may be true. We're still working out the finer details because we need the theory of quantum gravity. The only thing that quantum fields may depend on is space-time, but it could also be that space-time emerges out of the entanglement of quantum fields. I mean, we really just don't know yet. That we don't have enough knowledge to really make.
Well, I think there's a philosophical issue here, right? So I distinguish between material and like substance, as we're calling it, and the relational properties that like motion and stuff, right? And so these relational properties could be, understood in terms of mathematics, right? So if I'm taller than you, we can measure that, right? And they're represented mathematically, right? But the thing about a relational property is it's just that it relates one thing with another. So are you saying that quantum fields, they're either, for me, there's a true dichotomy between a property a relational property and a property that forms an object, right? It's either that there's a property that relates to objects or there's a property of an object, okay? So when you're describing these fields, you're either talking about an object or you're talking about a set of relational properties.
It would be the former with quantum fields.
Okay, so you're talking about objects.
Yeah, quantum fields are physical objects. They're not material objects, but they're physical objects.
Okay, so wait, I take objects to be material. How do you distinguish them?
It's just something that exists. Just like abstract objects, they're objects, but they're not concrete.
I don't know if that makes any sense to me. Like, well, I understand there are relational properties, right? They exist.
I mean, quantum fields do also have relational properties, but they also have properties that are inherent to them.
To them, an object.
Yes,
well, okay, it goes back to, and I just want to know how you're using the words. You're distinguishing an object. So there's like the apple in my hand, and I would take that an object synonymous with like a material thing, right? And then, of course, there's the motion, and all this stuff, like how it relates to all these other things that we can measure mathematically, right? Now, I guess at the same time, we can represent these objects, like the length of, let's just say the AMU of an electron, right? That can be represented mathematically too, I suppose. So I guess what I'm asking is the mathematics that concerns quantum mechanics, is it of a thing like a particle or an object, or is it is it of these other kinds of properties that are relating particles or substances or objects? Maybe I'm not understanding
what you're trying to ask.
Okay, so when I give a mathematical description of a thing that exists, okay, it could be, let's say, the weight of a thing, which is not relational, right? That's not a relational property, or I could be measuring the speed of an object, which is relational, right? So
Okay.
I'm just asking, is the math that you do in quantum fields, right, and in quantum mechanics, is it like measuring the speed of an object, or is it measuring something, the object itself, like the weight of an object?
The latter.
And maybe I'm.
Well, the thing is, it technically can be both. It just depends on what particular property you're measuring. If you're measuring the fluctuation of a vacuum field, that's going to be relational because that's how the differences in the quantities defining the energy of it differ through time. So that, I would argue, is relational. But there are other properties of quantum fields that you can measure, such as like momenta, position, energy, time, that are not relational. But then measuring those properties is where we get something that we call a particle. But
Okay,
particles, the thing is, particles aren't really, they're not really particles. They're not really objects. They're just perturbations in a quantum field with inherent properties.
So I just don't see. Okay, so going back way back, I'm trying to get at why you think that time is a physical thing, right? Because do you think causes are physical?
No, I would say the causes. What a cause is a relationship between two events.
Right.
Generally,
It's a pattern.
Yeah.
Time is as physical as the spatial dimensions.
Yes. So like time is physical because it has some measurable, tangible effect on physical things in reality.
Wait,
I.e., we can measure time dilation. We can measure, gravity. Well, we can measure gravity, which is curvature in the geometry of space-time. If time wasn't physical, then how could the Earth have an effect on it? If it wasn't physical, what would it be that the Earth is affecting?
yeah, I don't think this is a good argument, but the
Are
idea.
you saying that physical
It's not
things?
that it's a good argument, Danny. It's reality.
I don't
Yeah,
know what
and
that means either.
It is the metaphysical essence of a physical universe.
That's if I just say it's reality, that's just not physical. Are you going to accept that argument, Speed?
What's
Well, no,
that?
because if it's not physical, then how is it real?
Well, you don't. Well, there are arguments, but I don't know what you mean by non-physical.
Well, to me, non-physical is just
Non-physical is bullshit.
No, there is nothing that exists that is non-physical. Nothing.
Right.
So you're saying that a non-physical thing is just a thing?
No, a non-physical thing is not actually a thing.
Not
The
a
word
thing at all.
It's like when people
Right.
say
I misspoke. I
it's like
misspoke.
when
I meant.
people say before time. You
misspoke.
can kind of understand what they mean,
Let
but ultimately,
Let me interject.
it doesn't
I
make
misspoke. I misspoke. A physical
sorry,
thing is just a
sorry.
thing. Yeah, a
Well,
physical thing is just a thing. Then.
I simplistically, yes, I guess you can say that, but
A thing.
Okay. Yeah. I don't see how the word physical becomes a substantive term. Then at that point.
Yeah, because there's nothing to contrast it with.
What?
You need to accept that there is nothing to contrast it with.
Well, I think there is.
There
I have
is.
my own meanings, but I'm just saying, as an internal critique, the word physical becomes kind of vacuous.
Nope, not a problem.
I
Because it's all there is.
Yeah, I'm saying that's a vacuous understanding.
Not a. So accept that. Then you have to accept it. If it's vacuous, then fine.
Well, I'm not irrational, though.
Okay, you've got, like, I have a physical universe here in the blue box, right? And there are two particles, or fields, actually. Maybe a condensed field, or whatever the fuck a particle is, right? There are two of them. Okay, we have an X, and we have a Y. And we also have a Z running this way, right? But we also have a time running some other fucking way, right? And that is the four-dimensional space-time. That is the core metaphysic. Those are the core. You have to understand.
Wait, is everything outside the box?
It means something.
No, there is no
outside the box.
Such thing as outside the box. The word outside implies. The word outside implies that you have a space-time, and then a subsequent object in that space-time that some other object has some particular relation to. But if you don't have space-time, then you can't have objects, and you can't have relations between them. There'd just be literal nothingness.
But what you mean by objects is just a physical thing, right?
Yes.
So
this is a physical thing.
Then Yeah.
Physical things are just this space-time coordinate, this four-dimensional space-time coordinate. That's what we know about physical things, and that's how we approach them. Now, there could be a number of other dimensions that we're not aware of, or that don't.
Why is he drawing stuff outside the box when there's no outside?
There is no outside the box.
There is?
There is no outside the box.
Why are you drawing stuff outside the box?
Well, because I'm drawing stuff for you.
I'm thinking he's just writing in the margin.
Wait,
more.
he put T. What's the T stand for? What's the T for?
I'm
Time.
making notes.
Is time outside? Why is stuff coming out of the
You're
corner?
looking. You're
Hang on a
extrapolating
second.
far
You're
out of it.
confused. Okay. I see where I confused you. Okay. Okay. What I was trying to show you is that I have a two-dimensional space-time here, but there's actually a three-dimension.
Oh, okay, I get it now.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. There's also a fucking fourth dimension, which is time.
Okay, I misunderstood. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I think that.
It's 2D.
I mean, if we're using the analogy, if someone thought that there could be something outside of the box, and then they asked you why it was impossible, and you just reasserted that what it means to be a thing is to be inside the box, that's going to be question begging.
So wait, is it question begging to say that there's no such thing as north of the North Pole? Because what the word north means implies that you're south of the North Pole to some degree.
Well, okay. If someone is saying that it depends on what they mean by north, right? But
what we actually mean, like, so there's a direction. I'm sure when you're sitting down, you could probably point to a direction and say that's north.
Yeah.
And north is a relationship between your position relative to what we call the North Pole.
Okay.
So given that, is it possible to be north of the North Pole?
No, I think that's contradictory. That might be contradictory.
And that's the thing, is that there's no outside of space-time, because the word outside defines a relationship between two objects extant in space-time. So if you were outside of space-time, there wouldn't be an object there. There would be no relationship between that object and some other object, and there would be no outside.
Wait, so you're saying that for an object to exist, has to stand in relation? Like,
yeah, the only way that anything exists is in this relationship. And it's a space-time relationship.
You see, that doesn't... Are you talking about relational property or just property?
I would argue that for something to... for me, existence is not a property that things have.
Property is problematic.
It's a description of the state of affairs of things with properties.
But that allows for things like... I just don't see why a Platonist could accept that. I don't...
Is.
What? A Platonist thinks that abstract objects exist in some kind of third realm.
They don't. So
they don't.
Just ignore abstract things. They don't exist. They only exist when these particles here are little humans that start using words and confusing themselves.
Yeah, but a Platonist is not going to accept that. That's not going to be an argument for them.
I would just say that's cool. Platonism is wrong.
Well, but if they asked you for an argument, right, what would y'all say?
An argument for why there isn't a separate realm? For
a third realm.
Because I would argue that abstract things are emergent properties of physical space-time reality.
But
so they're not separate. And I can argue that abstract things are not material, but they don't exist in some other realm. They still exist in this realm. They just do so in a way that is non-concrete.
You only emerge when you got these guys standing around.
Yeah, but I'm just saying that whatever you're saying is not going to be forceful to a Platonist. Which means you have.
I would agree with that. I don't think a Platonist would accept it, but I think that's because they're a Platonist.
Well, the point is
I have found it very hard to convince Platonists against Platonism. Personally.
No, the point is that what argument could you give to show them that there's some kind of you might not think Platonism is incoherent then, right?
Yeah, I would argue it's incoherent.
It is incoherent?
It isn't. What is this other realm, and how do you know that it's there?
Well, the way they do that is they, like, for instance, Frege was a kind of Neoplatonist, right? We have he was very famous for philosophy of language and kind of organized our first meta language with respect to like logic. And he just looked at what it meant to say that something's psychological, what it meant to say that something is physical, and then understood the properties of a number, for instance, and showed that they're not compatible, so they're something else, right? And so That's what I think motivates people to think that out of naturalism, right? Is that if you understand a particular thing A, a category thing A, and it doesn't mesh with category B, then they're just two different categories, right? Like if I thought that the mind possessed this X property and all physical things possess not X property, why I'm just going to create a different category of ontology.
Well, yeah, I would argue that one has to do that to get out of naturalism.
Yeah, you can confuse.
I would
yourself
argue that that's really just a rescuing device, is all.
A rescuing device?
Yeah, it's a way to rescue some non-naturalistic worldview, like theism.
Well, no, some Platonists are atheists. Right?
I understand that, but I don't know of any Platonists that are naturalists, except there's been a couple that have said that the sort of Platonistic realm emerges out of the physical realm and thereby is still dependent on it. Thus, you could, and I'm willing to agree with that. If somebody says that there is some realm that's separate from the physical realm, the sort of Platonistic realm, but it emerges out of the physical realm, I think that is acceptable.
I'm not familiar with anyone that holds those views, but I mean, there are a lot of atheists, like Quine was a Neoplatonist, right? Frege was not a theist. Bertrand Russell was not a theist.
Yeah, but I was referring more to naturalism.
Being an atheist doesn't necessarily make you sensible.
Right,
yeah, and
right.
I don't think it makes you a naturalist either.
The point is that I'm saying, what does theism have to do with Platonism?
Well, what I was saying is that a lot of theists are Platonists, not all of them, but
most of them are not.
I would disagree with that.
No, I'm not even joking, right? Most theists, like for instance, a lot of people think Platonism is a threat to Christianity because it violates God's aseity, right? That God, if there's a Platonic realm, then God would depend on these things to have thoughts, right? We don't want that. They do not want that in Christianity. Craig wrote a whole book disputing this, right? That Platonism is a problem for Orthodox Christianity big time, okay? So no, trust, they're not.
Well, now, I wasn't speaking about Christianity. I was speaking about theism, which extends much more broadly outside of Christianity.
Yeah, but
Christians have a very weird philosophy that I would argue contradicts itself in numerous places.
Well, the point is that you were saying that you were giving a cultural motivation for accepting Platonism. I'm saying the way the culture is, which is in North America largely Christian, right? With respect to anyone, most theists that are in universities that are studying these issues are Christians, right? Or at least some kind of monotheism, and they see Platonism as a potential threat to divine aseity. Now, some people bite the bullet, right? And they think that God doesn't have an it's not self-existent, right? But it is a very common tenet in most theistic circles in North America to say that God has self-existence, right? He doesn't depend on any other ontological category. But if Platonism is true, right, then he relies on the Platonic realm to have thoughts.
Or why couldn't the Platonic realm rely on God? I'm actually asking that as a genuine question.
That is a view, basically. It's called absolute creationism, right? And that's the idea that God created these abstract entities, right? And then the other view, the most common view that you'll hear in these parts is something called divine conceptualism, which is the idea that these abstract entities exist in God's mind. There's not a third realm, so they're ultimately psychological, right? So,
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, but
I guess I was under the impression that people thought that this third realm was God's mind, because I hear a lot of people argue that things like logic and mathematics, which I would argue are abstract, they flow from God, so there has to be this thing there that's separate from the physical world that these things come from.
The divine conceptualists do try to do that. Okay, they're going to say, like, Matt Slick is notorious for doing this, right? He says logic. He said they're logical truths. In other words, propositions. Well, propositions don't occur without some kind of psyche. So what psyche holds them? Well, it's God, right? It's a horrible argument. There's a video of me pushing him on this, and he eventually booted me out, right? After 18 minutes of talking, right? They do that, right? But Platonism is an alternative to that view, right? And it's an alternative that most theists do not like, because then if numbers exist, if propositions and abstract entities exist independently from God, and they're sorts of things that we can have concepts of, right? If they don't exist, then we can't really have a concept of anything, right? And so that's going to be a problem for God in the terms of that there's some kind of dependency relation between God and these abstract objects. So I rarely see divine conceptualists pulling the move you're saying, right? That's actually quite common, but very rarely if you meet a theist.
Yeah, I guess when I used theist, I was generalizing where I shouldn't have been. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah. Well, generally.
No, but it's the way atheists and physicalists go off the fucking rails and leave themselves basically subject to the arguments of theism and a number of other bullshit arguments like idealism. It's by not understanding this thing about space-time and that being the core metaphysic of physicality and reality. There is no outside of it.
Yeah, for me, just really quickly, for me, physical space-time reality is, I don't know if I would say like this necessary thing, but at least right now, I think I could use that. Like there isn't, I don't think, I think that physical reality is non-contingent.
Exists at all.
I think
and if our universe began from some other state, then what physical reality is would just extend to that state, and if there was a state before that, it would extend to that state, so that if there was some sort of infinite past, then that is physical reality and it's non-contingent. Mainly because there's no such thing as outside or beyond physical reality, in the same way that there's no such thing as north of the North Pole.
Well, just so you know, I am a Neoplatonist, right? But I'm just saying that for someone to say that nothing can exist outside the physical realm, well, as a Platonist, I'm going to ask, well, why do you think that? And if you just say something like, well, all that exists is in the physical realm, that's not going to be that's not going to commit me to dropping my view, right? There has to be a lot more work done. But I think that you would really be, it's very short. Frege writes a chapter about why numbers can't be empirically known, or like in physical phenomena, and why they can't be psychological. One of the reasons why it can't be psychological is that the sorts of true propositions with respect to mathematics are going to be mind dependent. But presumably we think these are mind independent truths, like 2 + 2 = 4 is a proposition that's true independent of my thinking of it.
So you would argue it's an objective truth.
Right.
See, I would agree. I think mathematics is objectively true, but I think that for me, the truth of axioms or propositions in math is entirely dependent on whatever base system you're using. So where 2 + 2 = 4 is true in a base 10 system, in a base 8 system, that is no longer true. That statement would not be true. But a base 8 system can still be accurately used to describe reality. It might be a little bit more complex, at least relative to us, because we're very, very familiar with a base 10 system. But we can even look back in society. A base 10 system has only been around for a few thousand years.
Yeah,
maybe like 4,000 or 5,000.
You have a view. Michael Dummett and others have a similar view where they're not so concerned with truth conditions. Rather than, they just want to talk about mathematical statements in terms of proofs, right? So 2 + 2 = 4 is proved, but not true, right?
I think I would make the argument that it is objectively true in a base 10 system. Well, if given a base 10 system, there's no way where 2 + 2 = 4 is not true, and that would hold independent of what people think.
Yeah, I think you would just say that. Okay, what you just said there is what I mean by 2 + 2 = 4 is proved or something. I think that's what he would say.
Okay. Which I guess makes sense to me.
Because
so are you saying, really quick, are you saying that the word objective is not necessarily the most accurate term to use there?
Well, the problem is that yeah, so you could talk about the sort of connections between each mathematical statement as being some kind of fact about reality or fact about how the world is, right? But in terms of what, like for instance, Donald Trump has been president for 6 years. Well, it follows from that Donald Trump has been president for at least 1 year. There's the inference there is licensed, right? But in terms of, let me change the second proposition to Donald Trump has been president for at least 5 years, right? Both of these propositions are false, right? But the inference is licensed, right? If Donald Trump was president for 6 years, he's been a president for at least 5 years, right?
Mhm.
These are false propositions, but there's a kind of the kind of inference there is licensed. So that's how I think Dummett looks at mathematical propositions. That look, we shouldn't care about the truth or falsity of these propositions. We should only be concerned about what we're licensed in terms of inference, right? I think that that could be considered objective in that sense, right? That, but I mean, to say, I think the moment you say that that Donald Trump has been president for at least 5 years, right? Well, that's going to be false, and you might adopt some kind of correspondence theory of truth as to establish that, but you're not talking about proving anymore, right? In terms of the conditions that make it true. You're not talking about inferences, right? Anymore, right? But yeah, I think that's how I would. That's one way to go, is to say, look, truth and falsity really don't apply to mathematical statements, just what follows from what.
Okay, yeah. And actually, I would say that I would agree with what you've said there.
Yeah, that's dumb.
But the philosophy of mathematics is just really interests me. I could talk about that for hours. Just because even different perspectives are.
Well, go ahead. Want to do a book reading? I was going to read a book on Phil of Math, and it's actually for beginners, because I'm very I'm like pretty low tier with respect to my mathematical knowledge. So if we read it together,
what is the book?
Prim. It starts with a P. I have the book. I have the PDF version. Let me post it. But
can you? I was going to say, would you be able to post a link to that PDF?
I'll email it to y'all. But
okay, you do have my email, correct?
Yes, I have everyone's email. We should do a reading of it, because
I would be down.
Because you know why? Because I have the philosophical background more or less, and y'all have you have the mathematical background, and in order to make sense of what's being said, you have to have both, right? And I don't have.
I would agree with that, right? Wholeheartedly, yes.
I don't really know a lot about the math, so we should read it. It was recommended to me by someone that is a professor. So let me post. I'll email right now everyone the book.
Oh, you put okay. I might have it. I'm not sure.
But I want to be quite serious about it, in the sense that we should devise a schedule and then talk about it, and maybe we can stream it, right?
That would be pretty cool.
What we could do is like take turns in terms of presenting the chapter. So like Leo can present I'll present the first chapter, because a lot of the metaphysics is there, and then once we get into the chapters where I don't know anything in the math, Leo can make a presentation of each chapter, and we can schedule it in a way where, like, because I really am super interested in philosophy of math, I just feel so constrained based on my knowledge of math, right? It's like philosophy of biology. You got to know biology before you know the philosophy knowledge is not going to help you, right? Just to understand philosophy and biology or whatever. So, y'all are interested in it?
I am, yes.
Yeah, I'd love to take a look at it. Just, I guess, Speed, you can forward it to me?
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a good book. It's not for it really covers a lot of material without being too jargony and too technical.
Interesting.
You know who wrote it?
Yes. Let me get it for you.
I mean, I'm just curious to know who the author is.
Yeah, the author is well, I read one book and it was just really confusing, and it was by George Velleman and some other guy. So this one is written by, I have it here. Give me a second. It's I'm opening the book right now. Linibo. I can't.
How would you spell that?
Can you put that in chat?
Yeah. Let me.
Put the name of the book in chat and the author.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna put it in private chat.
Oh my God, I hate that. You guys are fucking idiots.
There we go. That guy.
Okay. So.
Oystein Linibo is how I would pronounce that. I don't know if that's correct. Norwegian philosopher.
It's not even a real name. Come on, you made that shit. Nobody can be named that.
Ooh, at the Department of Philosophy at the University of Oslo.
Okay, many in the philosophy of mathematics.
Philosophy of logic, philosophy of mathematics, metaphysics. Ooh.
Okay, get book, Apple Books, Kindle Store. Oh my God, where the fuck's Amazon Prime? Oh
So
my
what
God.
was the name of the book?
The Princeton Foundations of Mathematics, Philosophy. Sorry, it's Princeton Foundations. So it's published. That's the publisher, presumably.
Is it
Philosophy
just
of
called
Mathematics.
Philosophy of
Yeah,
Mathematics?
Princeton
Yeah,
Foundations
okay.
of Contemporary Philosophy, or that might be the
Yep.
subtitle.
Yep.
Let's see if he exists on Amazon.
Yep, he does. Hardcover, 1939. Paperback, $21.95. Kindle, $13.17.
Okay. Philosyphilis of Mathematics.
Sophisticated original introduction to the philosophy of mathematics from one of its
Princeton
leading
Foundation series.
contemporary scholars.
Are you familiar with Sellers and I don't know what the fuck is it? There's some wood sellers. There was this whole bunch of realists that popped up around the University of Minnesota in about, I don't know, the 30s and 40s, and they wrote a whole bunch of books. And they used to have like an annual book on it. It was pretty funny.
Some of the work, there's some work in here from some people that I do like. David Hilbert, especially. I've liked him. Kurt Gödel, John Stuart Mill. Oh yeah.
Read now on Kindle Cloud Reader.
Okay, I'm about to email it to y'all.
Awesome.
I'm putting.
All right,
shit.
guys.
Oh,
I
shit.
gotta go hop in the shower, so I'm gonna take off.
Well, if y'all
Yeah, I gotta go
wait
too.
before you go, can we schedule the first, like, maybe well, how much time do y'all need to read the first chapter?
It would depend on how long it is. I can read fairly quickly.
Okay, let me see how long it is, and I'll let y'all know, because we're all busy, presumably, right? The first chapter looks it looks pretty filled. Oh my gosh, this is pretty. We might have to break it up. It's 28
part 1 and
pages,
part
but
2?
it's not easy material towards the end. Let's break it up. Wait, what's the introduction? Okay, let's just do the introduction next week. Introduction is 2.5 pages. We can do that, right? Okay. So let's do the introduction on Saturday. Okay.
Is that okay? That's okay with me if it's okay with Speed.
Yeah.
Now that's plenty of time, and then we'll divide. We're gonna have to divide, and then the first chapter, 1.1, problematic Platonism. That's the first chapter, 1.1. So we'll be discussing Platonism, and
after today, I can agree with the problematic part.
yeah. So it's divided. Okay, so we do. I'll put up a schedule, and then everyone can okay it. And if you don't end up reading the section, then the people that do can just be the ones that guide the discussion that day. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, cool.
Okay. All right.
We got a series. Nice.
Awesome.
Okay, guys,
Alrighty.
we should end this. Shoot this in the head tonight.
Going about 2.5 hours. Yeah.
Thank you, Angela Russell, for your.
Bye, guys.
Okay, goodbye. We'll see you. Ending the broadcast. We're gonna, without fanfare. Goodbye, cruel world.